Okay, now let's look at the big picture of a hypothesis test. Because there are many steps in a hypothesis test, I want to explain the big picture first. Then it will be easier to go through the steps in more details. All right, so we talk about what is the null hypothesis and what is the alternative hypothesis. First, we want to assume the null hypothesis is true. Remember, the null hypothesis is the one with the equal sign. So take these two, null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, for example. The null hypothesis is mu is equal to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and the alternative hypothesis is mu is less than 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Notice that these two statements cannot be true at the same time. Usually we want to prove or we want to show the alternative hypothesis is true. But before we reach that goal, first step, we want to assume the null hypothesis is true. The one with the equal sign is true. Okay, so assume mu is equal to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, and we talked about sampling distribution before. Basically here we want to pick a sample from the population and look at the sample and see where that sample stands at the sampling distribution. If that sample, sometimes the sample is significantly high and sometimes the sample is significantly low, and sometimes the sample is neither significantly high or significantly low. Okay, take our example. For example, since we're trying to examine about the population mean, the sampling distribution is a bell curve distribution like this, right? So for example, if I have a sample, the sample mean is 98.2 degrees Fahrenheit. I want to decide if this 98.2 is, I know it's low, it's lower than the mean, but I want to know, is it significantly low? All right, so if the sample is significantly high or significantly low, we will do, calculation on it. If it is, in this case, significantly low, then there are two possibilities. Either we've seen a very rare event, because once it's significantly low, the probability of this event happening is, really rare, right? Another possibility is the calculation is based on a wrong assumptions. So remember, our assumption is the null hypothesis is true. So we will have to conclude that the null hypothesis here is not true. We reject the null hypothesis. Therefore, the alternative hypothesis is true. But this may not always be the result, right? Sometimes we reject the null hypothesis because we find the sample statistics significantly high or significantly low. But sometimes we fail to reject the null hypothesis because the sample statistic is a not significant number.